Welcome to the Mountain Mamas lecture section of our canyoneering training that we do annually. I'm going to attempt to go through all the information that's needed for the ACA basic lecture portion, and hopefully that will make sense to you and help give you some skills for going into canyons. First, we're going to start out with clothing and gear. Basically, the clothing that we'll want to have is closed-toed shoes for obvious reasons, pants that can take a beating. I feel like a lot of my pants, hiking pants, just get shredded in the butt. So anything that can take a deep beating in the butt is helpful. Layers for the top. I like to have like a thin synthetic top, then a fleece in my pack, and a shell at minimum, just because you never know what the canyons are going to have. If it's summer and hot, of course, I'll have a t-shirt. I kind of like the synthetics, but yeah, that's what I would probably stick with. A thin hat if it's cold, that I like to have just a little winter hat underneath my helmet. Thin gloves if it's going to be a colder canyon. If it's neoprene, I like to do that if it's going to be a water canyon. Sunglasses, sunscreen, sun chapstick, all the things. I actually wear this hat underneath my helmet and it helps provide some sun protection as well. And then a backpack that can carry all the stuff you're going to need. I prefer to have water bottles in the canyon, like an Nalgene or something like that, just because I think the the camelback tubes and stuff like that get caught in things. They can get caught when you're rappelling and they just fall in the dirt and things like that. So I just like water bottles that are burly and can, even if you have to toss the pack for some reason, they can take a beating. And then of course snacks and things like that. As far as gear, we want to have a helmet, climbing helmet. It's got adjustments in the back and then shin straps underneath. We'll want to have harness. I just have a climbing harness, and a lot of our gals, that's what they have. There's actually really awesome canyoneering harnesses. They have a little loop in the front that makes it a little easier for your belay device or rappel device when you're going down canyons. And they also have the nice little plastic protector of your butt. This is really helpful. Highly suggest that if you're really into canyoneering. We want to have a locking carabiner and then also a rappel device for going down in the canyons. We do not recommend having a figure eight or an ATC. We like to have devices that you can actually add friction to and lock off. So they'll look something like this, the little fancier types of devices, and then they'll all come with a locking carabiner. And they will attach into your harness at the belay loop here. Just kind of a rule of thumb is metal goes here and cloth, like ropes and things like the PAS will attach to both the top and the leg loops and go through both of those. The PAS is actually your personal anchor system. I have it attached here on my harness on the left side of my belay loop. This is my preference because I'm right-handed. I really like having it out of the way. And then it's just girth hitched in. And then I have it with a carabiner that I clip into the side on one of my gear loops over here and keep it out of the way. So that's my PAS. A little tip on descenders or rappel devices. There's a whole class of them, multiple classes of them. First, you have your ATCs that are called the tube descenders that you use a lot in rock climbing and things. We have the assisted braking devices, which is a gree-gree. It has like a little brake release. We use in canyoneering what's called the figure eight devices or something similar, where essentially it has a hole in it that the rope is going to kind of go through. This is very similar to squirrel. So the rope is going to come through here. As a bite, and then it's going to clip into my carabiner here, my locking carabiner. There we go. It'll look like this. And then you'll be using this part to hold on to as your brake. And this device actually has really easy friction options and lock off options, which is one of the ones we prefer is the squirrel. All right. Just some other fun facts about descenders. If you're going to be doing any caving or anything like that with us in the future, they have bobbins. This is a bobbin called a Simple Petzl Simple. They're really fun. And we're not going to be using these in canyons, but it's fun to see the different descenders. You put the rope through here and use that to head down the canyon. They also have racks and things like that, the J-frame and such. You also can rappel on a carabiner with a munter hitch. which is super like emergency scenario, but do know that that is also an option. Other gear we want to have are leather gloves. I prefer leather gloves. Just in case if you're going to go, if something happens, you end up going a little faster, that your hands don't get wore out. Um, and if you had garden gloves or something that was rubber, I just don't like it as much. I feel like they can melt, things like that. So I do like the leather gloves. These are my full finger gloves that I've chopped off the first two fingers and the thumb because I feel like I'm using these fingers to get in there and work on gear and things like that, getting my carabiner undone and things like that. But I like to have my pinkies and ring finger covered because when I'm rappelling, those are the fingers that seem to get burned a little bit if I'm not careful. So with friction. Other things you'll want to have are your headlamp in case it's a late dark canyon. I think I always just carry this because you never want to be in a canyon without one if it's dark. And sometimes things just happen in canyons and you're there longer than you think. Always have a whistle for emergencies, and we'll talk about whistles later. And then a first aid kit as well. With Mountain Mamas, your guide is going to be carrying their own first aid kit for everybody, and it's super fun and really heavy. So, really appreciate all the hard work they do for you. The trip leader is also going to be carrying the ropes or having you guys carry the ropes and rope bags, which currently we have that look like this. If you're going into canyon, you want to have at least 3 times as much rope as the longest rappel. We always like to have the ropes that we're going to be using in the canyon and then plus an extra rope for the longest length rappel you're going to have. So if something happens to any of your ropes, you always have a backup rope for top belays and an emergency rope to get you out of the canyon. Also, a little tip on ropes. There is a difference between static and dynamic. So, a static rope is something that's not going to have stretch, like 5% stretch or less. It's kind of what is the general thing. Watch out for ropes that are semi static. A lot of them advertise that, and you do not want to have a semi static rope in a canyon. We've had issues with that, and it's just this last year. Um, so static ropes are used for rappelling and also for ascending because they're not stretching, and so they're very helpful for that. Dynamic ropes do have about a 30% stretch, and they're used for rock climbing and things like that. And of course, you would always want to have a dynamic rope if you're going to do especially lead climbing. But for canyons, we like to have static ropes, and we prefer to be on a 9mm rope is generally the rule of thumb. 8mm if you want to do things a little lighter, faster. They'll get up to 11 if you're going to be doing rescues and big hard stuff like that. But generally, like a 9mm, somewhere around there has been really great for us. And we usually get a 60 meters and 70-meter ropes are good for your first canyons. And that's what we carry with Mountain Mamas generally. Um, we also have repeats. This is something your trip leader is going to be carrying. Repeats are used to help set up anchors. In a lot of canyons we're going to be going through, you'll already see these there. But we require our trip leaders carry one repeat for every rappel in case they need to set up a whole new rappel system at any time they're ready to go. Also, they need to carry enough webbing for 10 feet of webbing per rappel. And for the same reason, if they have to set up an anchor for every rappel, and that they also have extra stuff if we need to do any extra rigging to keep you safe and things like that. We also, as the trip leaders, are going to be carrying figure eights because we do what's called an 8 block as one of our main releasable anchors. So we'll have eights. We have what's called a totem to set up an anchor system in a totem jester mode. It's what we like. And then also we have lots of locking carabiners. There's never enough locking carabiners, I think. We'll also be carrying walkie-talkies for communicating on the top and bottoms of rappels, which is very helpful. And then if the area we're going to be in doesn't have a lot of cell phone reception, then we'll have a beacon. We use the InReach Mini, and it's super cute and just clips on to probably your trip leaders, either their shoulder strap or they'll have it in their pack. We just turn it on by using this top button here. Press and hold. You can see the little screen turns on and it gets all excited. Yay! And it's searching for reception and things like that. If you want to activate the emergency SOS, you have to lift up this little clip here, and there's a button in there that you push, and that will activate the SOS. Our trip leaders are trained on how to send messages and things like that, and we do that throughout our trip as well. Just little text messages to our base commander, which works out really well. The first aid kit, also told you about that. It's got so many things in there. um, for splinting and bleeding and had to spend the night, all that kind of stuff. So those are the things that our trip leaders will be carrying. They also are going to be training this year on ascension systems. So they'll be carrying either mechanical ascenders or prussics. This is called the VT prussic. It's a 7 mil specialized core um, cordage that's got a special coating that can take a lot of heat. And we use these a lot for self belays. So a VT prussic. And we're going to probably have about 2 of those per trip leader. And then also slings and things like that for ascension. If we ever have to do rescues and things like that. General rope and equipment care. We want to check our ropes before and after every time we use them on a rappel. So when we are counting out rope and getting stuff ready for a rappel, we're also feeling the rope to make sure there's no bumps, cuts, scraps. What's called those white core shot. If you see any white in the rope, ropes are consisted of an external sheath. That's usually a colored sheath, and then the inside is a core. So if you ever see white, that's the core, and we're always watching for that. And we would have to cut the rope at that location on the rope. But as you're feeling through it, we're always feeling for rough spots, bumps. A little external sheath wear is fine, but we always want to make sure that our rope is good before we go on any rappel. And then when we finish the rappel, we're going to ask you guys to stuff the bags, and we'll also be managing that with you. And when you're doing that, we're doing the same thing. We're kind of bringing the carrying the rope through our hands and trying to feel for any kind of um, cuts or scratches or and discrepancies in the rope. We want to make sure the rope is nice and safe and looks good. We also, when ropes get in wet, nasty, muddy canyons, we'll take them home and wash them. I generally just throw them in like warm water in a bathtub, let them soak, drain out the water, and then spray them down. And then I dry them out on towels in my house. You don't want to take them outside and bake them in the sun because that UV can really damage ropes. Chemicals can damage ropes. Those are your probably 2 big things that will really destroy a rope rapidly. As far as all the rest of your equipment, after you go in a canyon, it's always nice to check them, make sure the screw gates on your carabiners close well, and that they close smoothly and they're clean. Just go through all your stuff and make sure it looks good and clean. The carabiners are notorious for jamming, and so it's always a thing that I recommend anytime you lock it off that you go back just a smidge, and that will keep those things from jamming on a rappel or before or after. Okay, that's gear. Now we're going to move into flash flood risk. We do not enter canyons when there's a chance of a flash flood, period. Every canyon is going to have different levels of risk with flash flooding, and some are very sensitive to just a little bit of water and that thing's going to flash. Some can take a bit of water in its watershed and they'll still be okay, but we always want to be monitoring that and checking weather forecasts as well before we hop into any canyon. I prefer to do the National Weather Service, the NWS.gov. You can check. And it also comes up on his app because I feel like it's pretty expansive in what it can cover, and also has Doppler, which I like to watch in real time and kind of make conclusions as to where our water patterns are going to be falling. The watershed is the big thing that you're watching for flash flood risk, and a watershed is any stream that is going to come into the drainage that you are going to be in. And so you're going to want to watch. It helps to have a topo map or pull up your Gaia, which is one of the apps we love to use, GAIA. It's free. And you can pull up a topo of where you're going to be and kind of check out the drainage systems and see if there's going to be rain in that area. And you want to be careful with that kind of stuff. Absolutely. So a flash flood is something that's sudden water in a canyon. Things that we want to watch out if we're actually in a canyon and we start to see rain and we're like, what the heck? We didn't even think there was going to be rain, or maybe we were, just kind of watching things. If you start seeing water come down a canyon that's supposed to be dry generally, or if you start seeing the water that was clear is now going brown and has debris in it. Obviously, if you hear rushing sounds and things like that, we're trying to get out of that canyon fast. Usually the safest way to get out of a canyon is up. Getting to high ground if you're at all possible. So usually when we're going through canyons, we're always checking for exit routes, especially if they're really narrow canyons, going, okay, in about 5 minutes, I remember there's that turn and I can get out, or behind us. Just try and keep an eye out for possible exits all along the whole time you're doing a canyon. Let's see. Okay, now we're heading into the rating system. So the rating system for canyons consists of 4 categories. First one is a number. So the number is 1, 2, 3, or 4. This is the technical readings. So first is not technical. We're talking about just like a hike. Second is may have some scrambling. So this is like a little slot canyon. They're scrambling around. Three is technical, and we're going to need ropes to do rappels to get down around things. Four is advanced technical. So for Mount Mamas, our canyons are all threes. All right, the second category is a letter, and that's the water level. So that is A, B, or C. Dry, sometimes dry, and sometimes we'll have standing water, and then water with flowing water. So we will do all three of these. We do A, B's, and C's with Mountain Mamas. The third category is the numerical Roman numeral. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 or 6 actually gets pretty high. And this is time. So a 1 is only a couple hours. A 2 is a half a day. 3 is a full day for most groups. 4 is a long day. 5 is 2-day trip. So 5 is when you get into like overnights. 6 is more than 2 nights, or 2 days in the canyon. And then our fourth category is a risk designation. And you don't always see these, but it'll be a PG or PG-13 means we've got some risk. An R is dangerous, consequences, experts only. And an X is very dangerous, seriously, experts only. So Mountain Mamas, we don't usually do these ones. So that's your rating system. So most of the canyons we're gonna be doing are three ABs or three ABs generally, with a 2 or 3, maybe a 4. Is kind of the categories that we usually do. Okay, now let's talk about low impact in the canyon. Pack it in, pack it out. Leave no trace, no garbage, no toilet papers left in canyons. Put it in a Ziploc bag. If you're in a really sensitive canyon, and we would let you know, we don't want you pooping in those canyons either. So you want to bring 2 Ziploc bags with some kitty litter in the middle, the inside bag, and that's called a wag bag, and throw it in your packet and just carry it out. Super fun. Another thing is cryptobiotic soil. This is super sensitive desert dirt that is actually like the life anchor of these arid climates. So it'll look like sand that's got really bumpy with black dusting on top. That's a cryptobiotic soil. And we want to be really careful and avoid those at all possible, usually walking on sandstone rocks and stuff like that. If you had to cross an area that had crypto and you had no other choice, our recommendation is to walk single file. So that way you're making the smallest possible impact on that environment and step in each other's shoes. We call it don't busting the crust. Another thing is avoiding rope grooves on the edges of these beautiful sandstone cliffs. That happens a lot when we're having to pull a rope at the end. And so the way to avoid that is if we're able to set up our anchor so that repeat is as close to the edge as possible or high so that it's not causing those really edge rubs as much as possible. We do the best we can. If we've got rope protectors and can use those, we do that as well. All right, so now we're getting into the canyon. Some of these are the features we're going to go into that you don't need ropes for. Scrambling, say like we're going to be going through an area and we're like, it's just going to be boulder scrambling and up and down stuff, and we're just going to need to just help each other. It's called a partner assist. We can help us each other go up or down. So going up, usually we recommend the tallest person goes up first, and we do what's called a tripod. So we have 2 people below and 1 person above, and we're trying to get up and over an obstacle. So the 2 people below, the person can stand on their thigh and then their shoulder, and then kind of get up and over the obstacle. If you're lucky enough to have an extra person as a spotter, that's ideal because they can kind of be there to help. Now, when spotting anybody, you want to have both hands up above your head and you're standing a few feet away from the person. If they fall, you do not want to catch their head. What you're going to try and do is find their torso and push it against the rock and kind of let it slide down. And that way you'll be able to kind of take care of the main body mass and then, protect the head and like as it comes down, but you're pushing on their body and bringing that down. Going down an obstacle, usually if you have the ability to lower somebody on a rope, do it. It's safe that way. Even if you've got webbing or something like that. I also recommend having the tallest person go down too, especially if you don't know what it's going to be like down there. Then same thing if somebody's coming down, they want to belay it's the first person down while everyone else is coming down and you're lowering them down, keeping your hands up and protecting them as they're coming down as well. There's 3 categories of going through canyons, stemming, chimneying, and bridging. And it just has to do with your body position. So if there's a crack in that we're navigating over. If it's kind of narrow, we can put a foot on each side, and that's called stemming. If it's a little bit wider and I can't really put my feet on both sides, but I can put my feet on one side and my back against the other, that's called chimneying. And we can go up and down and sideways doing that. And if it's really wide, we can do what's called bridging, where I have two hands here and my 2 feet over here, and I'm seriously committed to this obstacle. It's the most intimidating, I think, of all three. But those are the ways to navigate through these obstacles as well. We'll be creating hand lines for anything and anyone that feels uncomfortable. And you can use those as well, lowering yourself hand over hand if you feel safe, or you can also do it as a rappel in your rappel device to traverse sideways or down obstacles. All right, main causes of accidents. So the first thing we like to do when someone comes up on the rock is do what's called check. CHECK. So before you go down any rappel, we want to do C stands for clothing. So we're going to be checking your jacket is tucked into your harness, that your hair is pulled back, not just in a ponytail or a cute braid, but is actually tied up in like a bun under your helmet. We've had people, even with ponytails and braids, get that all snagged up in the rappel device. So make sure that hair is tied up tight. No long dangly necklaces, no sweatshirts with ties, because all this can get wrapped up and caught into things and make for a lovely rescue scenario. So the next letter is H. That'll be your helmet and your harness. For the helmets, we want to make sure that they fit on your head tightly and snugly. They clip under your chin. And that they're nice and snug, not so much that they're going to choke you, but that it's nice and snug below both ears so that when I go like this, it doesn't fall way back. So that's a good tip. With our harnesses, most people have what's called an automatic double backing harness. Back in the day, and some of us still might have these old harnesses, the webbing will go through a one plate buckle and then have to be taken back, which is called double backing, through the buckle to ensure that the harness would stay secure. If you have this harness, it has one plate. That's the way to tell. If your harness is an automatic double back, it has 2 plates, which pins it in, just like this harness does. This is the most common one that everyone's doing nowadays. So you just make sure when you're checking your harness and other people's harnesses that you can tell if that's got 2 plates or 1 plate, right? And if it's if it automatically double backs, you just need to make sure it feeds through both plates, comes up and over one of the plates and back down. So it's being pinched between those and comes back out the others. All right, E, equipment. That's dealing with our rappel device and that we've got a locking carabiner. So we need to have those, and it's in our belay loop right here. Fantastic. C, connections, meaning that a rappel device is into our harness appropriately. And if you are a first belayer or first rappeller, which would only be our assistants or trip leaders, guides, you have a VT prusik, and you're going to be using that as a safety. Those are your connections. And if you're also doing a top belay, that we make sure that's attached to you appropriately. H or K, knots. If you are doing a top belay, we will do a figure 8 follow through your top and bottom of your harness. And that'll attach to you as a second rope that you are not rappelling on. Just a rope that we'll have from above that we lower down with you and that we can stop at any time to make sure that you are safe. All right, so that's check. Now we're going to go into ropes. Main causes of accidents with ropes is obviously poor rope, old rope, chewed up rope, poor shotted rope, all these kind of things. A little bit of rubbing on the external sheath is okay, but core shots are not okay. If you are rappelling the rope at any time and see something weird that makes you nervous, a white at all, when you get to the bottom, let us know or yell out if you are concerned, and we will throw you a top belay line and make sure that that rope is safe. And that's another reason why we carry extra ropes in the canyons in case we have to retire a rope or for the rest of the trip. Another concern is that ropes are not long enough when we're going down rappels, and we'll talk about how to fix that scenario. Another cause of accidents is the wrong anchor system. I feel like a lot of people will just come up to an anchor that has a repeat and just put a rope through it and put both ends down and double rope rappel. There are so many things wrong with this scenario. When you hear people rappelling off the end of a rope, that's how it happens, is in this scenario. If you were ever going to do this, you would need to tie knots at the end of your rope. I actually recommend tying the ends of your rope together. So there's no way that you could rappel off the end of your rope if it was too short. Someone will have to definitely be doing a rescue to get you out of that scenario, which is another reason this is not a good option, because there's no rescue option for double rope rappelling, because you're using both of your lines. You need a second rope to come do rescues. So we always use what's called a releasable anchor. We like 8 blocks. They're really easy. You just set them up with the carabiner and a figure 8. We can also do the totem in the jester mode. And we can also do MMO, which is a mule munter overhand, if we just have a carabiner. So we have lots of releasable anchors. So if anything happens to you on a rappel, we can lower you physically down to the bottom of the rappel and you'll be safe. Another concern about accidents is rappelling off the end of the rope. That's just what I said. Never double rope rappel. We just do not do that in Mountain Mamas. We always use single rope systems so we can save the other part of the rope to do rescues and lowering if we need to. Another cause of accidents are bad belays. A good rule of thumb is someone's coming down. I've got both hands on the rope. I'm looking at them. I like to see a straight line between me as the belayer and the rappeller. I don't want to see a big J. That J means that's how far they have to fall before you catch them. So we want to have a nice straight line, but we don't want it to be tight, as if it's tight, the person can't move. So you want to have a nice loose wiggle in it, but you don't want to have a big scooping J. Another tip is do not rappel like this, looking up at them with your hands like this. Rocks can fall onto you. You're not in a good anchored position. The better form is to have 2 legs staggered like this. I'm with my head looking down. So if rocks fall, that's going to hit my helmet. And I've got 2 hands on it. One is kind of up here and one's down here anchoring, that I can do a nice good pull. And that's the best way to do rappel from below. Another thing is not spotting each other on scrambles. If you're going over the obstacles and people are feeling nervous, spot each other. Take good care of each other, help each other out. Another thing is, if there's ever water, don't jump in, because we don't usually know the depth of water. And so we can always lower someone down in gently and have them test how deep water is before we actually commit to that area. But that can be very, very dangerous and fatal. They're called keeper potholes. And if you go into a water hole and you have no way to get out, you are just trapped there, and that will be the end of you. So we don't jump into water, and we always test the depths as we can. All right, belay. There are 4 different types of belay. We have bottom belay, which is what we talked about, the fireman belay. We also have a top belay, where a second rope is attached to you through a figure 8 onto your harness, and we're actually lowering you at the same time you're rappelling on your own rope. Then we have the self belay, which is done with a prusik, and you'll learn how to do that as well. And that's attached above. You can do it above or below your rappel device as you're going down. So that's if you're the first person over a canyon rappel, and you don't have a fireman belay below you. You have this as kind of your self belay, and that'll come with you. And if you let go at any time, it binds onto the rope and keeps you from falling. So it's your self belay. We also have the 4th one is a hip belay, which is something we can set up if it's just like a short scramble over a little slope. Not too bad. Our trip leader can be at the top, and they're in good anchored position with their feet and body, and they'll just kind of lower the rope or lower you, behind with the hip belay. Or it'll be a static line where they'll just hold it like this and hold it out, and then you can kind of move down on it. But those are just for gentle slopes and things that aren't too complicated. Okay, let's talk about the first person down. So there's always going to be a first person down a rappel that doesn't have a bottom belayer. So they're going to be always our trip leader, or usually an assistant trip leader. We usually have our trip leaders at the top, and we'll send our assistants over the edge. They are the big thing they're testing is if that rope is long enough to reach the bottom. And if we can see that, that's fantastic. But if we don't, that's also concern. We want to make sure that we send someone who knows what they're doing as they go over the edge. So they'll go over the processes. They have their self belay, they rappel over the edge, and they'll communicate with a walkie-talkie or whistle or yelling if the rope is touching or not. If the rope is touching, great. Then they'll continue to rappel to the bottom and we're good. If it's not touching, they'll communicate that. And we set up our releasable anchor at the top already. And so we'll just slowly lower rope until they're able to touch. And they'll say, I need 10 more feet. And we'll give them 10 more feet. And then they'll say, okay, rope is touching. And then they'll go down. One of the big things is someone who goes first down needs to know how to add friction and lock off so they can also do any rope management and things that they need to do while they're going down there as well. First thing is also another thing to check is that we need to make sure we know do our research to make sure we know what the longest rope is that we're going down to, the longest rappel that we're going to be doing. Make sure we have enough rope for that. I always check on Road Trip Ryan, Rope Wiki. There's a whole bunch of little of websites to check that on your canyons. And like we said, always have 3 times more rope than you need for your longest rappel. Then we also want to feed the rope through the rapide. So if we're measuring out rope to figure out how long that length is going to be, I read on Road Trip Ryan, this was a 100-foot rappel. I happen to have a 70-meter rope, which should be a little over 200 feet. And we mark our ropes with a black 6-inch black marking on the inside. So I'll first put my rope through the rapide. And if this is attached with some webbing to something, an anchor, box, or bolts, I put my rope through it. And then I'll start counting out 1, 5, 10. Usually most people are about 5 foot something. So your length from your fingertip to your fingertip fully extended is 5 feet. So you can just go 5, 10, 15, 20 and kind of count things out. I always give myself a little extra because after a while my arms get tired and I'm like, ugh. And so I usually count myself out a little bit extra. Then we get all the rope out. We'll tie off a clove hitch to our stopper knot to keep the rope from flying off. Make sure I'm clipped into my anchor too, and then I'll take that rope that I've just counted out and either toss that off the edge if I'm not thinking it's going to entangle anything or there's no people it's going to bean on the head, or I will throw out a little bit and just gently lower it until it reaches the bottom. If there's people down there, if I'm worried about their items, things like that. Excellent. All right. Let's talk about commands. So when we're setting up the rope, we can do hand and whistle signals or walkie-talkies. Now, if we have walkie-talkies, that's great. And we'll say, okay, the rope's long enough, not long enough, all that kind of stuff. But if we don't have walkie-talkies or we're in water or something's happened to our walkie-talkies, whatever, then you want to use either hand signals or whistles. So with hand signals, if someone's down, say like the rope is not long enough and we need to lower the rope, then you go like this, lower rope. If the rope needs to go up, this is up rope. If the rope is perfect, we go stop. All right. And if there's a danger, we go like this, or we'll go like this and point at the danger. Okay. Now, if you have a whistle, a long blast means stop. Like stop the rope, we're good. 2 long blasts means I'm off rope. So if I've got a rappeller going down, my first person down, and they are at the bottom, they'll just go 2 long blasts when they're off, totally taking their device and everything, and they're off the rope. Now, if there's an emergency, then we do 3. Emergencies are always the 3s. So 3 long blasts means there's an emergency and I need help. All right, now as far as rope management, if I need the rope to go up, I go up rope, 2 short blasts. If the rope needs to go down, 3 short blasts, lower rope. And that's how we take care of whistling. So someone's going over the edge and they don't have their walkie-talkie, our first person down, and I hear 2 blasts. That means, well, actually it'll be 3 blasts if they want more rope usually. And so they'll say lower rope, and that I know we need to lower them and the rope down until it gets to the bottom. Now, if there's a gazillion feet of rope at the bottom, they might say, boop, 2 whistles to bring up the rope a little bit. All right. Now, communication as far as being a rappeller going down the rappel for your anytime. The first thing, once you're attached and all ready, we've got done all your checks and your hands in a braking position, you're ready to go over the edge, you'll say, on belay. That's a question to the person who's our belayer at the bottom. And they will say when they're ready, belay on. All right. Then we will unclip you from the top from your PAS that you've been attached to. And once you're taken off that, then you're ready to rappel. So you'll say rappelling, and the person at the bottom will say rappel on, meaning I'm ready for you to rappel. When you get to the bottom of your rappel and you get all your stuff undone, you say off rope. So those are the 4 commands that you will need to know when going rappels. Great. We're almost done. All right, last section we want to cover is water canyons. We don't usually do a lot of water canyons, but we are starting to do more of them and we're getting excited. So we wanted to give you guys some water training. So first thing is if you needed to learn, you need to know how to float your gear in water. If you were swimming across something, Pine Hollow, Pine Creek, I think has pools. Lots of places have pools that you have to get from one side to the other. If you know you're gonna be doing a long swim, I recommend a pool noodle and cutting up a section of it and just putting it in your pack. Another thing you can do is if you're in a wet canyon, usually you have a dry bag to keep your dry clothing in case there was an emergency and you get hypothermic or whatever. You can blow up those dry bags and they act as little buoys to also help your backpack float as well. Ropes usually float okay for short periods of time. So, but if they get waterlogged, it's just a lot harder and they're going to become infinitely heavier as well. So just be aware of that. We do not wear waist straps on backpacks when we swim. We always want to make sure all buckles are off of us so that if something happens and we get stuck, you can just take your backpack off really quickly. A lot of times people don't even have it on their back and they're just pushing it ahead of them while they're swimming, which is one of my recommendations. Some water hazards to watch out for is entrapment. That's probably the first one I would be concerned about. Um, that's when your foot or something gets caught in debris or rocks or things under the water. And so we want to watch that when we go over any waterfalls or anything that has cloudy water to keep our feet safe and make sure we're not getting stuck in things. These will kill you. So be careful for entrapment. Anytime you're coming over anything that looks boggy and debris-ish, all that kind of stuff, just be really gentle on what's not secure to keep yourself from getting stuck in things. Flowing water, never use a waist strap on a backpack, especially in flowing water. Usually, if we're doing a rappel into flowing water, we want to make sure the end of our rope is not touching, like maybe barely above it. Because if we have the rope getting too far down in here and someone's rappelled in, and then have to get all the rope in. Anyway, there's chances for entrapment and entanglement and stuff down there. So our rope is just right above the water, so you kind of rappel off of it and into the water. And if you have to swim or whatever like that, that's easy for you to do. Another concern about water hazards, hypothermia. So usually in wet canyons, we'll be doing wetsuits or dry suits depending on temperatures. And then, yeah, like we said, you want to have a set of dry clothing with you in a dry bag, as well as hand warmers and all that kind of stuff to keep yourself safe and dry in those canyons. Last thing is potholes. So that's like we're saying is a pot of water that's been carved out, and we never want to let anyone go into these until we have a way for them to get out. So never jump into a hole you can't get out of because you may not be able to touch the bottom, and then you're just stuck in there and you can't get out. We have ways to do more advanced skills that we'll teach you later, but point now is just never jump into anything that you don't know the bottom of, can't feel the depth of. The safest way to do that is we're going to lower somebody on a hand line, or they can rappel in as long as they've got access to a rope to get themselves back out if they need to, and we can help them. If you have a really long stick and want to check depths, you can do that as well, but we're not ever going to do a jump test where you just jump in the water and see how deep it is, because there could be all sorts of debris underneath that water and you can break legs and all that kind of stuff. And last tip is water slides. If you're lucky enough to do a canyon with water and has water slides, you want to make sure that those that they're usually pretty slippery around them. So just be careful in that area. Make sure there's no rough rocks on the way down. You're going to cut yourself going down a water slide. Watch the exit into the water as well for sharp rocks. It's not spitting you out into something dangerous, and that there's no hidden undercurrents as well. We always recommend feet first, hands crossed over, and with your helmet still on. And hopefully you've got a wetsuit on that protects you as well as you go over the edge. All right, that's it for your lecture. We're so excited to have you come on our canyons this year and hope you have a wonderful, safe year.